construction and everything going on down there. So apologize for being held up today. Three-time Grammy nominee. I was nominated for a Grammy in 2004. I lost to Ray Charles. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
I got a really cheap digital camera for losing. And
Really?
And a stamped letter from the society saying how proud they were of how terrible it was. So just to let you know, you get that close sometimes, Doug, and the letdown is huge.
Ray can't even see through the camera.
But I re-gifted the camera to my father-in-law for Christmas. What I thought we would do today to separate it from tonight is simply discuss what we've been doing to prepare, because this band usually has no substitutes in it. The actual guitar player is a guy named Eric Fratzke, who I've played with for a long time, the band Happy Apple. And something happened where he had an emergency situation, a family thing or something, where he couldn't be here today, but we wanted to continue to do the show. And I'm a firm believer in, working ensembles in jazz. I'm not someone who really believes in the idea of interchangeable members just on the last minute and having to scuffle through the music. But we really felt like, it's not only important to keep the show for the series and everything like that, but also to take advantage of the idea that we can talk about how we prepared to play all original music with no charts for you tonight, with this really nice young musician who I've been meaning to play with for a few years. I met him when I was on tour with this band, the Bad Plus. I met him in Lincoln, or was it Omaha, Nebraska, and where he was living at the time, and we met and have been in contact. And he lives in Madison and comes into town frequently, plays with people. And so we're finally getting a chance. I thought about, well, I want to call Luke, see if he wants to do the music. And Luke learned all the music, and he came to my house last night, and we played through the music for about an hour. After you had some nice cheese and some cashews, and we had a nice cheese plate. Yeah, fine wine and cheese plate. But what this group tries to do is we try to play music that, we try to, essentially we try to play music, we do play music without charts. So sometimes when you see jazz groups or whatever and they're reading music, what we try to do is take that ethos of that the music is being presented for you, we know it, instead of needing to, even if it can be complex, we try to learn it by rote and memorize it in order to kind of own it that much more spiritually, if you will. So Luke did that as well, preparing for playing with us today and tonight, which I thought was really nice of him to not even have little cheat sheets or whatever, but he's really ingested the music. To me, that means he really wants to be here and knows it, instead of just sort of I can read music and this is just a job. And I think you can hear that in the music when you see people just kind of getting through a date, if you will, with just your ability to read and your general knowledge of jazz harmony or whatever. I think that when you have a stylized band and music and a certain compositional concept, it's so important that everyone is really feeling like the music is their own, even if they didn't write it, I think. So he came over last night, and what I think we should do, I think would be kind of fun, is, if it's cool with you guys, is we'll reenact a little bit of last night after the cashews and cheese. We're not going to have that. I couldn't afford to bring cashews and cheese for everyone here today. That got a huge laugh. But the way that we went about it, so there might be a note here and there that we need to stop and talk to Luke about, or perhaps Kat will have some very strange outbursts that everyone will have to deal with. This is what we are. It's uh-oh. So, and then tonight we're going to play the music. If you come back, we're going to play the music more in concert form and hopefully have it
concert
together.
White touches.
Yep. But it will be a rare thing because we usually will never do a concert with a substitute. Now there's another member of this band that lives in New York City. We're able to do some local shows here and there without him because it is a two-horn, he's the saxophonist named Chris Speed. And so we've done a few shows without him in town. Just flying him in for something like this would have been difficult, but when we do go on the road or when we play in New York or wherever, we usually have two saxophones and then Eric on guitar and Adam and I. So anyway, we're short that, but that doesn't matter as much for this overall sound of the band. In fact, he just takes up space a lot of the time, you know what I mean? We should kick him out. He's really expensive to have around, you know? So why don't we play the Dolly Joe Benjay tune, this sort of like swinger, if you will, and we'll see where it's at. Like let's play through it, we'll get up to the soloing section. You're going to take a little bit of a solo, and then maybe we'll stop and talk about it, see if there's any questions, how we did this. How did they do it? Okay. Watching a YouTube clip, which I thought was fantastic because there was no chart on it or anything, and he watched a YouTube clip and learned it. So we were going through last night all the pitches. We recorded it for him. We made sure that he knew all the pitches. There's quite a few. That tune is kind of almost in an Ornette Coleman style. There's some blues in it. There's some definitely the key moves around here and there. But let's try it again. Now, how did you feel like? There's a few moments where you're like, what's
Yeah, so I had learned it off this YouTube clip, and I had kind of, YouTube's not exactly like the highest fidelity format for learning things, right? So I had kind of taken some guesses at some notes and had sort of internalized it like that. And then, oh hey, I'm learning it wrong as I found out last night.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of spent some time this morning trying to reprogram that. And yeah, so obviously I kind of missed.
But the ideology behind it is we could just hand him a chart. Luke reads very well, and then we'd all play it. But then there's something in the way that he's having to kind of ingest this and own it in a way where he doesn't have anything to rely on music. To me, if he hits a wrong note here and there, but he's in the moment, like spiritually, if you will, again, like he's just here playing. To me, that is in many ways the spirit of the folkloric nature of this music. This isn't chamber music, you know. This is music that has an energy of the moment in it. So in the moment, if that's happening, then that's fine by me, you know, as long as he's not going, instead he's just playing it, and if there's one or two things, some of the greatest jazz recordings in history have mistakes all over them that are some of the most elementally beautiful parts of the music. So that's why they're left in, you know, that's why no one is visually editing them. All right, should we try it again? Is this cool format? We're gonna rehearse for a little bit, is that all right? That's what they said to do. We have to make it different from the concert. It was a very serious note. There was an envelope under my doorstep this morning, a very odd manila envelope that said, whatever you do, you know, don't make it like tonight. We have to mix it up. We have to sell this thing. Okay. Now, when we formed this group, or when I put this band together, when we got the original saxophonist, we just had one saxophonist, the guy that lives in New York, Chris Speed, and I ended up meeting Brandon, and I thought it would be a great sound to have the two saxophones. Brandon had to learn all this music in the exact same way, something he was not also. He was not used to that idea of memorizing some music that can be kind of complicated. Never getting to rely on a chart, actually reading it, never relying on that. And I mean, I like to think that it's affected your musicality to have to do that in a positive way. Am I right? Like,
Yeah.
It's made you
Absolutely.
know the music more deeply and experience it on another emotional level, maybe.
Yeah, it's a really great feeling to know something that well, where now you can just feel like you can play and not, have to worry about, what section's coming up, and you can really see the whole song as one big thing, that is really meant to be. A song is not section by section. Of course, there are bridges and things like that, but we want to treat it as one thing that flows naturally, something that we can just play and make the most music that we can on it.
Absolutely.
So there's no way to do that other than to know it, 110%.
Also, in this music, there's a performance energy. The greatest jazz groups in history, if you went to see the John Coltrane Quartet, for instance, there wasn't charts on stage. There was never a chart in an Ornette Coleman band or a Miles Davis Quintet. They weren't reading that music. They were playing music for people. It's almost like if Led Zeppelin showed up, they didn't have charts in front of them. People would have been like, what? There's some sort of boundary, or, it's almost like just a little bit of a wall, I think, between the energy, the performance energy, when someone is standing like this, and when someone is just playing music for people. And I don't think the idea of how complicated the music is a good excuse. And I'll only use myself as a reference that I play in a band called the Bad Plus. We just performed the Rite of Spring in its entirety, not sections and blowing on it, and we memorized it. So it's like, that's 42 minutes, no one bar repeats. And I've dealt a little bit in the contemporary classical world and played some smaller pieces and etudes in my life, but dealing on that level and actually attempting to ingest it was it tested, my ability to, accept that I could do it. It was a huge task where my family attested driving around in the car, listening to several versions, looking at the two piano score every now and then, but never playing with score, never doing anything. And then the night of the world premiere, which was at Duke University in March, 5 minutes before we went on stage, I had this complete blank, and I went into a total panic, thinking, I can't believe I don't have the music in front of me right now. What did I do? I can't believe I did this. I was so nervous. And then, when we started playing it, it all kicked in, the information kicked in. And that only reaffirmed my belief that all music is an oral language. Regardless of, for whatever tool you're using it for, whatever style you're using it for, it's very doable that an orchestra doesn't actually need music. It's actually true, and I don't know, I would kind of freak out if I saw the London Philharmonic with no music in front of it playing. I wonder what it would sound like, I don't know, but anyway, we're really dedicated to that, and that can be a difficult, you think, well, why don't we just have this chart and we can just play the head, it's over with. But there's some other energy in it. There really is something palpable that you can feel that he is working on this. And when he knows it, there's going to be a certain confidence in his playing that you're going to be able to hear when he's playing tonight. When he's soloing out tonight, there'll be a confidence that's palpable, I think. We saw it in Brandon, who was never used to working this way. In fact, I think when Adam first started working in this band, some of the complicated music, he was looking at the way Eric and I were working with each other, which we worked together for 15 years in this band, Happy Apple, which everyone in the band can read music. It's always this thing where we're trying to work it out. And I remember you looking at me like, we were getting ready for this Walker Art Center performance, and you looked over and you were literally like, I can't believe this discussion right now. Like, everyone's going like, Mike's standing there like, humming notes.
David was using a keyboard that wasn't in tune, and he was playing things for Mike and Eric, and they're like, they had played with him for so long, they're like, okay, I know what you mean. Is it this? Like literally, the keyboard was like, like if the batteries were running, it would be like, and like Eric's like, you mean this?
And he looked over at me. He's like, "This is an amazing thing to be a part of." Really, though, once he got beyond the shock of how inane it looked. But then he's now worked in this environment with us for 2 years, and I know it's affected your playing. You know what I mean? The fact that you have to play these very intricate parts. This music, there's never a chart for it. He has to learn things very quickly. And he does, you know, it's like a whole, and of course he played by ear, so these things, but these arrangements we're playing with are not, they're not standard arrangements. And we're gonna play a couple of other tunes today, or show you examples of what Luke has done. Some songs he never solos on, he never improvises on. He has to literally just play an auxiliary role instead of everyone, now it's your turn to solo, now it's your turn to solo. This is much more band dialogue music, songwriting. Okay, should we try that one more time, and then we'll try a different tune where he has a different role that he has to play. How's that sound? And maybe we'll play it this time. Let's play this tune now, like we're gonna play it tonight. It will be, of course, totally different and 1,000 times better. Now than it will tonight. Right now it's gonna be unbelievable, and then you'll feel overconfident.
And then it's just
And then tonight it's gonna be a disaster, and then we'll have to dock his pay. That's how it works. This band.
no more fake spread.
Nope, no more cheese, no more cashews. So that was great. We have to play it that well tonight. We have to play it that well tonight.
That's good to put that on us.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really helpful.
So let's try the ballad. Church Goes with Wallet Chain, and you play a little bit up front. So we'll talk about this for a second. This is a ballad off of this record we made, and Luke is just gonna. His role is really to provide a sort of color, tone, a very simple idea, but it's super effective. It's actually one of the things that makes the tune for me of when the guitar enters. And he showed up last night, and he played it perfectly. It was like he understood the role, he understood the vibe of the piece. He didn't come in like, and I'm going to like over-express myself because I need to express myself. It's like a great musician will just know, even within an improvising situation, thinking compositionally always. If there's something very busy or something very intense, we're trying to serve the song, and that's the thing, the ideology behind these groups. They're not just, these songs aren't just soloing vehicles. You notice during his solo there was bass and drums, then it became a duet. That's a planned thing instead of a, you know, like, then we'll just drone on with everyone taking a solo, and Adam and I did the solo. So this piece, there is no solo, other than there's a little bit of a bass intro, and then he takes these moments in between the main melody to set up each one. And so this kind of highlights the bass, but in a very subdued kind of way that serves the tune. No long intros, you get that later tonight. Okay? It's lunchtime. Okay, so this is called Church Clothes with Wallet Chain.
But you want an intro?
Yes, let's play it like the record, you know, like we normally do. You always do your other stuff on the other tunes. You always set this up like a mellow thing, right? That's not how we do it live. Just like the record, right? Adam Linz. When we're done with the first melody, while Adam takes his first thing, start fading in that in there. So
At
then
that
by
point.
the time we're in the melody, you're in here already. Yeah, I think you did that last night.
I think I did, yeah.
Okay, cool. So again, he came in with that learn. It's a deceptively simple piece of music. There's a lot of some odd bar movement, not a lot of complicated harmony, but still playing the role of knowing just how to build it and to not say too much is important with that piece. And of course, I should amend one thing. It's not a naive perspective to be like, why don't the orchestras of the world throw their music away? There's of course a serious amount of workload, but I'm speaking on the terms of maybe one piece, for instance, to take the rote nails, like some great string quartets will memorize some music. That's kind of what the ideology I mean, and I think that the music would sound different. Just wanted to amend that statement for a second, because I have worked within contemporary classical ensembles. It is a very difficult thing, for instance, to just put an Elliott Carter piece in front of someone and say, now we need this learned by tomorrow night. So, anyway, So I think we're good on that though.
Yeah.
Vibe on that. Everything was cool.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we do one more? And then, are there any questions right now for anything that we're doing? Is this a cool format for what we're doing for the thing? Are we honoring the sponsors and the grant? Doug?
Totally, you're on the mark.
Awesome.
Are they here?
Positive. They're all here. Okay, any questions right now?
I was just wondering, like, when you wrote the music, did you write it with charts or?
No.
No.
No, I wrote on piano. In my writing, there have been charts here and there that I've needed to have. In fact, that first piece we played, your original piece of that, there was a chart that I wrote out. But some of the music goes way back. The first piece actually was a piece that's 16 years old or something. I tend to, even as complicated as the music can be, I tend to want to be able to play it myself. I do play piano, not on any real performance level, but as a writing tool, I can play my own music, and so.
But you have a piano record.
I do have a record I do through composed music, but if I'm teaching music, for instance, to the pianist, to the band plus, whatever, I want to be able to play what I'm showing him, so he learns it that way. Even though he is a brilliant sight reader and can do it like this, he prefers that also to with a working band to be able to know the music. He sits down with it and learns it. Actually, the saxophonist of Happy Apple, Mike Lewis, who maybe some of you know, is incredibly fast at learning things by ear, and his memory is amazing for music, which is an amazing thing to check out.
Yes.
Where he will learn a piece of music and then we don't play it for a year and he remembers it. That's like wow. So that's been the case a few times where we've talked about a piece of music that we haven't played in 5 years that we played once, and he sits there like, and he gets the first note and then it just goes. It's very funny. Anyway,
I saw Mike do that with a piece, like somebody brought
Yeah.
in the Clown Lounge one time, brought some like, I don't know if it was Terry McManus, brought in some like 5-page tune, and Mike kind of like, oh yeah, that's cool. Just,
it's amazing.
what?
And you know, he learned all this music that I put together for this concert at the Walker Arts Center, which he didn't play on a lot of it, but he just played the auxiliary role of learning it for any saxophonist that's going to be here. He learned it all in one rehearsal, and then he came back and played it all. And it was very, very great. Anyway, but that's a skill like anyone develops. There's many people, the bass player of the Bad Plus is that way, can read anything, you know, has a classical music degree from Curtis Institute, but prefers to learn music by ear. So it's a skill that definitely is something that's important when you have a working ensemble. Again, that seems to be the overall theme of today.
It gets easier too to do it as you
Absolutely.
learn that way. It gets quicker and faster every time you do it, and you'd be surprised how
Yeah.
much you can actually learn.
Exactly. I've often felt in my life that as soon as I read a chart, I rely on it. That's just this thing that all of a sudden it occurs. Like I've had to do it where, of course, everyone has to be in a situation. It's very important to be able to read music. But I immediately can't take my head out of it then. And then it takes that much harder to memorize and improvise on. I learned that early. The way that my mind worked anyway was like, I'd rather not even see it. If someone even hands out a lead sheet or something, I'm immediately just kind of like, I'd rather just listen.
I think like with some of your tunes too, in the process of learning his music off the record, some of the pieces would have been harder to learn off of a chart, because like the last tune, I think, when it gets into this like mixed meter prog rock section, if I'm having to read and think like, oh, we got like 2 bars of 4/4 and it's like 3/8 or 5/8, instead of just like
Hearing it.
feel it, hear
Exactly.
it, I think it takes some of the thinking stuff out of the
Absolutely.
equation.
I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the saxophonist, the avant-garde saxophonist, Tim Byrne, a very, very famous saxophonist for the last 30 years, making records of unparalleled kind of original thinking and very complicated music. I've been playing with Tim now for about 5 or 6 years, and some of his music just testing your ability to memorize, and it's been a really great experience because he reads his music. In fact, he can't memorize his own music, and most people read his music, and it's been a heavy thing to be attempting to memorize his music day of that sometimes, or But you start to learn the person's language. And every composer has a language, really, and now it's become where I can learn the music just really quickly. Like I can hear, it's not that he's repeating himself, but there's some sort of thing, I kind of know the decisions that are going to be made, and I can hear the syncopation where he wants things, and it becomes less and less intimidating if you just face it down. You know what I mean? If you can have someone be patient with you, then they'll know that the payoff is big in the end. And that's what, like with Luke, I wasn't gonna sit there and go, I'll just write it out for it. And say, no, let's keep doing it, and let's keep doing it. It's gonna be fine tonight. Let's play that last tune. So this one is kind of a complex piece of music. This one has some things you have to kind of feel, but there are some complicated rhythms that go along with it, but there's no form to the piece. It has to be cued by hearing certain notes. We'll not explain anymore, we'll just try it.
Roll this one.
Yeah, let's try it. We won't even talk about what times are you sure of any of that nerdy stuff. We're just gonna play it. Right? deal with one of those performance anxiety like nightmares just now. My bass drum pedal was for some strange reason it was sticking to the head.
Feel that really.
It's like one of those dreams where it's like you're trying out for the Who or something, but the pedal is going against the string. You have to keep reaching down and grabbing it off, and they're looking at you like, who is this guy? That was going on almost the entire, like it waited to the hardest song to do that. You know how I deal with those anxieties? You know how I deal with it, man? I just bury it deep inside. I never bring it up again. I manifest like gout and arthritis. Okay, do we have any questions?
Could you just talk a little bit about, like when you're playing with a soloist, maybe in like a more supportive role, like do you like to keep the melody or the changes of the tune like as a reference point, or are you more focusing on the lines that they're playing?
You know, that's a great question. I mean, I suppose it depends on the composition.
Sure.
You know, on something like that, for instance, I'm definitely, we're playing this certain math figure underneath him, and I'm trying to kind of react with what he's doing. But the whole first half of the tune of that was written until it gets, these giant ascending lines that he was playing were all written, and they're happening within the time. And when he landed on this F sharp for a second, we had to hold it for a bit, and then he holds that, and then it begins the second half of the tune, which he starts improvising underneath. At that point, that figure that keeps changing that we were playing, I was really just trying to play almost like a supportive, kind of a groove role, even though it was kind of a thorny, kind of complicated thing to be doing. Instead of really reacting with him within that as much, there were some sections where I kind of lifted off a little bit underneath him if I was inspired to interact with him, but everyone was sort of caged to that figure underneath. And so that way, we're not reacting to any melody at all. We're just reacting to Brandon's ideas, but trying to stay, keep this thing underneath him chugging along. If I'm in a situation of like anyone playing a standard or playing within anything, I really believe in the idea of like dialogue improvising. So I think there's something, to be said about people that have a long playing relationship, that there can be a trust that the support doesn't necessarily mean not getting in the way or politely being a musician. I mean, I don't know if the greatest music has happened with people needing to hook it up all the time or like support everybody's great idea. Sometimes the search, when everyone's involved in a musical way, can become the heaviest thing, when people are sort of interrupting the space of maybe the traditional arc of a solo gets interrupted by someone else's idea. I'm really interested in those ideas, and having the trust with the musicians you're playing with to know that it's not just, I need to do something here and you have to listen to it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, it's almost like, I'm just not sure how interesting it is to, like when somebody says I'm play free jazz or whatever. Okay, and they're like, which I play a lot of free jazz, but everybody here does free music. But that language, when somebody says I play free jazz, a lot of times that translates to somebody just going. And also that's what humans like are like as soon as we let ourselves go and just are purely emotional. We just walk around like this, and like that's not really it. And I've come face to face even with some of the great free jazz musicians, the great ones, where I don't know how much improvising is actually going on. It seems to me like it's already been decided this is what free music is. I think if you were, I'll say it, let's say you were playing with Peter Brotzman or something, and I just went like this for a half hour. I think he'd probably think, what are you doing? I don't want to make that judgment, but I played with Peter a few times. I'm just saying, like, Captain Beefheart didn't sing any ballads, you know what I mean? Peter Brotzman shows up, it's just gonna go, you know what I mean? Personally, I like to think of things in a complicated way. I don't want to think that free music is all of a sudden explosive and maniacal, but it can be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Cecil Taylor and all these iconoclastic thinking free musicians, but there's a song underneath a lot of that music, and I think it's super important to think like that when you're improvising. Sometimes I take that type of idea when I'm playing a standard or playing like that duet with Brandon.
Right.
That was actually very connected. In fact, Brandon is one of my favorite musicians to play duets with because he's totally listening. He's not soloing, he's listening to me, I'm listening to him in a way that's not, you notice how it wasn't just the normal arc and just screaming at the end or anything like that. It had valleys, hills and valleys, waxed and waned through the whole thing. And that's what we're trying to think about. So it's piece by piece for me. That's a long answer, but I think for everyone it's the same. It's trying to make something happen that doesn't necessarily answer a question, or maybe it does, but you're trying to make good music happen for sure, and not just, like I say, thoughtless expression. The bass player of the Bad Plus has an incredible, very opinionated guy, if anybody knows this guy, but he's a brilliant musician and says things I've really learned from him we grew up together, and he's lived in New York for 20-some years, but he'll just say things like, not everybody needs to express themselves, you know what I mean? And it's just perfect. Or he'll say things like, why does anybody feel like they need to talk to me? That's another one he says all the time. But like, why do we need to talk? You know, he says things like that. He's pretty heavy Scandinavian, by the way. But anyway, but like really interesting to actually think like that. Like, or says things like, just because it's possible doesn't mean it's interesting. It's like, think about that for a while. It's like, man, that's brilliant, actually. You know what I mean? It's like, some of the more, just being able to play a major triad and not buy into the dominance of jazz harmony. Thanks, Luke. Luke tonight. It's excellent music. He faxed me that chart. Yeah, I was supposed to play that when he left. I think I missed two. I did memorize it though, you noticed.
It's like a hibachi restaurant.
Anyway, that's all I'm saying. You know, the reason why this is fresh in my mind is I just was reading this article about some young free jazz musician or something, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of this person, you know, devoted to improvising. Now, I've played a lot of music in my life, you know what I mean? I was a free jazz Nazi when I was 15. That's why I laugh at that attitude now. I have the ability to laugh at that now. But like, also, I've played a lot of straight ahead music. I played a lot of rock music. I played contemporary classical music. I mean, I immediately thought to myself from reading this article, I knew exactly what I was going to hear the second I clicked on, here's an example. And there's a little film of this person, and you know, I mean, this is what it was. For a half hour, you know, and I'm like, here we go. It's like, is that really what we are when we lose control of ourselves? Are we being pure? Is that purity? No. That's not pure. That's like someone who is a punk along with every other punk. That's not individual. It's the same thing. So a complicated emotion is use all the tools when you're improvising. So then they mean something. If I'm going to get into some cavalcade of density, which I do, I absolutely want to use it like I'm still on the earth, even though I'm a spiritual being and I'm channeling the moment and I'm doing all of those things. I'm still playing music, and I am in control of myself, and I can be pure at the same time. I think that's a more pure attitude, like what is the song you're working with, and then letting yourself go within it without expectations. I just think the expectation is when you're playing free music, it must become atonal and dense instantly, and that's just not the case. Doug?
Yeah, no, I was just going to let you know, well, one is a statement and the other is a question. First of all, you can wrap it up whenever you'd like. And then the other thing, what was the impetus behind forming this group? I mean, yeah.
That's a good question. Okay, well, I had been wanting to put together a band outside of the groups that I've been in for a long time, the groups of Happy Apple and Bad Plus, which I spend most of my time with Bad Plus. Happy Apple's had a very great long relationship that continues, although we've been on a little bit of a hiatus the last few years. We're going to make a new record coming up. I had two projects that I wanted to put together. One was this idea of a band that there were hints of almost roots sounding music within the tunes. Like that ballad we played almost has this hymnal American roots idea. This is not a new idea to use American roots music, of course, and then it jettisons off into the avant-garde. But one of the things we try to do in this thing, one of the ideas I had was to simply play songs every now and again, like that one, where there weren't solos. They weren't all just vehicles for improvisation. And almost the way I used to watch the great country bands, because when I grew up in my house, my mother listened to old country music and my dad listened to jazz and old rock music, old rock and roll. And I used to watch these old country bands on TV, like Hee Haw or something, or Nashville bands or Austin City Limits in the 70s, and you'd see these bands playing, and they just played so proficiently. They were so, like, played everything exactly the way it should be played, with great feel and great time. And it was performing in front of people, and they were human beings with instruments, and it was just this, like, it was almost perfect. It was like perfect sounding, even though it was very rootsy, and it had all the elements of, like, some of the rough-hewn folkloric nature of music, American music that I love. So I thought about the idea of what if we had some improvising musicians doing 3 or 4 pieces during the set that there's no improvising in, but they can only be played by improvising musicians. Like, that piece would be difficult for maybe a Nashville guy to play because it had a lot of different odd moments, odd bar moments that are actually within the tradition of Delta blues odd bar moments, but even further odd. And then, so an improvising musician is used to maybe dealing with these different, more progressive tools, and then we don't improvise. My band, The Bad Plus, does this a lot of the time, where we'll play a song where there's no improvising, but we really feel like there's only improviser could play it. So there's that relationship again that's sort of ethereal, like what does it sound like when someone who can improvise doesn't? And that's the nature behind the band, is the idea that it's all original music, it has some sort of songwriting aspect to it, but it also adheres itself to some of the moments in jazz history that I love, like in the torrid 60s kind of stuff that Brandon was kind of playing there during that big piece. The whole first half of that piece is almost like a Coltrane exploration, but then again it utilized different tools that were modern, and then it moved into this kind of rootsy guitar thing, but then the odd time was there, or the odd bar was there, all kind of grooving though, not sounding like Rush or something. It's more like, sounded like if Levon Helm's band played odd time signatures. Levon Helm's band, that was a Zen paradox. All right, is that Doug, is that cool? Is that,
Yeah.
That's the idea. It's a subtle idea. It's a subtle idea. You know, the blues and roots music, of course, are the beginnings of all jazz and all avant-garde, but it's almost like all of a sudden you take Don Williams or Mel Tillis's band in 1975 and you say, here's John Coltrane and here's Ornette Coleman. You know, maybe they're not into that stuff. Maybe Roy Clark never checked out Ornette Coleman, but what if he did? That kind of hypothetical situation. And stopped looking at all the girls on Hee Haw and got his act together. All right. Cool?
Yeah, and then
All right, that's gonna.
We'd love to see everyone tonight.
Yeah,
We're gonna play
tonight.
so well. Luke's gonna be great.
Yeah, tonight at 7, tell a friend, and then every month there's different bands coming in here, so check it out.
Cool.
Dave
Thank you.
Construction Company.
Thank you.